Our last two ports of our cruise take us to Australia's island state of Tasmania, and our first stop is Port Arthur.
The area has a beautiful coastline, but it's known for the British Empire's penal colony that operated in the 18th and 19th century.
We're on a Holland America tour called the Tasmanian Island Eco Cruise. As we were boarding our boats, I began to wonder. All the seats had seat belts, and we were given heavy rain ponchos and ginger pills for seasickness. Our cruise will take us along Tasmania National Park and the rugged coast of Cape Pilar. But first we have a smooth ride through the bay and a good view of the Port Arthur Historical Prison Site.
I guess in our convict history in Tasmania, we were dealt with the repeat offenders. So you had people sent to Australia from England, so kind of the worst of the worst were sent down here to Port Arthur. Now the main reason they chose this area was this beautiful waterway, which we'll quickly explore before we get out to the open ocean. But you had the main settlement, which you can see the old buildings over here, but they used this whole kind of area for Port Arthur historical convict system. You've got the Isle of Dead on our right here, so this is where they buried everyone from the convict system. There's about 1,300 confirmed people buried on that island, which is pretty astonishing when you look at the size of it. The convicts buried not in the nicest fashion, standing up with their arms crossed, just tucked next to each other, yeah, so they could fit as many as they could in there. And then you've got Point Pure, which was anyone that was 9 years old and upwards was sent out to serve a sentence. So there was kids 9 years old sent out from England all the way down here to Port Arthur to serve a sentence for stealing a loaf of bread or committing a crime. And 9 years old, when you think about it, is incredibly young. And they started kind of a separate little boys' prison here, like a juvenile detention system, I guess you'd say. And rather than doing physical work, they were more taught to read and write, more of a schooling environment.
Oh my goodness.
So like I said, these are called a common dolphin. Now that is their name. It's probably the most common dolphin we see, pardon the pun. But they're named a common dolphin because you find these in nearly every ocean around the world, and they tend to group up in some of the largest pods of dolphin, which out of the species of dolphin, they tend to run in the largest pods. So it's what you call a super pod. And sometimes you can have up to 1,000 individual dolphins in a group, and you'll come across those in the bay, and it is just gorgeous. It's just wall to wall along the harbour of these little common dolphins.
Oh.
That's why it had two fins then. Oh,
That's why it looked like it had two things.
Sorry, I'm trying to not
That's all right. You're
block. You're good, don't worry about it.
In these sea caves.
Cool.
I just want to have a bit of a chat about the rock type. So what kind of rock you're looking at here? I know it's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but it's pretty important, seeing as we'll be following it for a very long time. But it's very famous in Tasmania. Most of our iconic features, most of our really famous parts of Tasmania are this one rock type. So it's what you call Jurassic dolerite. So it's from the Jurassic period. So it's about 175 million years old. But when Tasmania was breaking away from a greater landmass, it was cracking, it exposed some of the gaps in the core, which let this magma, like this hot molten liquid, this molten rock, expose. And that molten liquid sat under there as a pool for a very long time, and it actually cooled underground. So it was like a ceramic, or like an oven. It was trapped without any oxygen at extreme heat. So it slowly baked over a very, very long time, which makes it very, very hard. So it's one of the hardest rocks in the world. See a bit of a difference in the rock type, more of a layered rock. This is a mudstone, permeated mudstone, about 280 million years old. This is an old sea floor, so it's a sedimentary rock. So it's previously underwater for a very long time. So this one with the layers, you get incredible amount of fossils in it though, it's just stunning. But that kelp, you can just see that here, that beautiful thick bull kelp. We all consume this kelp, we eat this kelp somehow. But what happens in Australia is that kelp washes off the rocks. We go and collect it, and then we sell it, so we dry it. Once we collect it, we dry it, then we sell it. Most of it we sell to Scotland and Norway, European countries. They process it, like they granulate it. They turn it into a fine white powder, and then we buy it back off them for about 10 times the price we sold it to them for, just because that seems like the smart way to do it. And what it becomes when we get it back, processed, is an agar, or an emulsifying agent. So it's a binding agent.
As we make our way along the coast, we get our first views of Tasman Island and the 1,000-foot-tall sea cliffs, the tallest in the southern hemisphere.
These are seals. They put their flippers up in the air to have the evaporation and the wind cool them off.
Hello, nice wave.
Waving goodbye.
This is called the totem pole, one of Tasmania's most famous dolerite columns. The next day we're in Hobart, heading out of town for Mount Fields and Russell Falls.
It's a short 10-minute walk to our tour, and there's only 5 of us today, including our tour guide, Jeff.
We stopped in the small town of New Norfolk, and after peeking into a pet food store, we picked up some picnic supplies at a grocery store, before heading on up to the national park. Once we arrived, our guide explained why this is such a unique UNESCO World Heritage Site.
If you've got a place or a thing which you think is so special, it's got outstanding universal value, they will assess your place or object or building against 10 criteria. The pass mark is 1 out of 10. So as long as it's outstanding universal value. Now the reason I mention this There are 2 places in the world that meet 7 out of the 10 criteria. That's more than any other World Heritage Area, and of course this is one of them. The other one is Mount Tai in China, or Taishan. My Chinese guests get excited by this, which meets all 6 of the cultural criteria and 1 of the natural criteria. Here in the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area, we meet all 4 natural criteria and 3 out of the 6 cultural. That's what this display is about. I came across a new phrase recently. I read a report that talked about one part of Tasmania as having hyper-endemism. Now, endemism is where you have a lot of endemic species. They're not found anywhere else in the world. So a lot of Tasmania's plant and animal and bird species are found nowhere else. Huge level of endemism. So it's really important that we have a big area set aside to protect those species. And we've got some pretty crazy critters. So of course the 2 monotremes, the platypus and the echidna, the egg-laying mammals, they are plentiful here. The Tasmanian devil. Tragically, I think we've lost the Tasmanian tiger, but if you see one today, make sure you get a good photo and preferably some DNA and we'll be famous. This black shaded area, that's the extent of the World Heritage Area. So it's 20% of Tasmania. Now this is quite a large island, sort of 250 to 300 kilometres across. To have 20% protected as World Heritage is fantastic.
On our way to Russell Falls, we learn more about the ecology of Tasmania.
Pretty much divide our forests in 2 categories. It's either rainforest or it's eucalypt forest. Eucalypts are a species very much adapted to fire. They need fire in order to survive, and we'll talk about this a bit more in the tall trees forest. Rainforests, on the other hand, can't cope with fire, can't deal with it at all. So in Tasmania you've got the eucalypt forests, the rainforests, and forests like this, which is somewhere in between. So this is what I would describe as a mixed forest. We've got a few big eucalyptus trees. We've got rainforest trees, dogwood, sassafras, and these beautiful ferns and mosses. And of course the most obvious fern are these that sometimes get called tree ferns. Where I grew up we called them man ferns, but that exact fern, according to the fossil record, grew in Antarctica. So hence the name. Beautiful big fern. I learnt just recently that's not actually a trunk. To call that the trunk of the fern is incorrect. As the fern grows, the new fern fronds sprout from the middle, the old branches bend down, and then they actually break off and they leave this sort of dead stump. And that dead stump stays attached and protects the root of the fern. So strictly speaking, this is a root surrounded by dead growth. Is it going to be 50 years till the next fire or 500 years? Now if it's hundreds of years, the rainforest species will creep back in and start taking over. Of course, if there is no fire here for 500 years, the eucalyptus trees will all die out and the rainforest species will completely take over. So all of Tasmania is kind of in this arm wrestle. Now of course north-facing slopes, more sun, more likely to dry out, more frequent fires. So the eucalypt forest will dominate the north-facing slopes, and vice versa, south-facing slopes, you're much more likely to get the wet eucalyptus forest with the rainforest underneath and much less frequent fires. And in parts of our west coast where we get all that rain, well, there are huge sections, whole mountain ranges, where there's not a single eucalyptus tree. Here, it's 100% rainforest, no eucalyptus trees. So this is what the west coast of Tasmania looks like. We've got miles and miles where it's just rainforest. Hasn't been fire for many, many hundreds of years. So this is, I really love this because the eucalypt forests all over the place. But it's the rainforest that is a bit more unique, bit special. And it's cool rainforest. A lot of Australians, they think rainforest, they think the tropics. But here you come to Tasmania, we've got cool rainforest.
Our next stop is called Tall Trees Track, with some of the largest trees in the world.
So these are the kings of the forest. We call them swamp gums. They also grow in Victoria, in the ranges east of Melbourne. They call them the mountain ash. So given that the redwoods and sequoias are just a little bit taller than these, we can't claim the world's tallest tree. However, the sequoias and redwoods, of course, they are a conifer. They don't have flowers. Eucalyptus trees are a flowering plant. So these are the tallest flowering plant on earth. But it goes beyond just these trees. If you take the world's tallest 10 species, purely ranked on their tallest single specimen, 4 of the top 10 are in Tassie.
Wow.
So we have 4 different species of eucalyptus tree, which are all in the world's top 10 tallest species by the height of their tallest specimen. So that's pretty impressive. We like to brag about that.
Sure.
Some scientists were studying what they describe as the theoretical maximum height of trees. And they were British scientists, so take it with a grain of salt maybe. They climbed to the top of the tallest redwoods, and they found something common amongst the, you don't call them leaves on a pine tree, do you? Sort of the needles, I guess, were suffering water loss at the top of the tallest of the redwoods. And that was consistent across each of the tallest ones. They were suffering water loss at the top. So clearly they believe those trees are at their maximum height. These guys though, they went to the tallest specimens of these, no sign of water loss at the top. So maybe they have a taller theoretical maximum height. Or maybe just eucalyptus trees are better at coping in low water situations. Yeah, who knows? So maybe as a scientific theory it's clutching at straws. But we do have some anecdotal evidence. In Victoria, back in the 1800s, there were people logging these giant trees. And one team of loggers claimed that they had a tree, now I don't know what this is in feet, but lying on the ground they measured it at 135 metres, which is well and truly bigger than the tallest redwoods or sequoias ever found. And it was too long ago, we don't have any evidence to back that up. But it does stand to reason that perhaps the tallest specimens of these were the ones further down the valley, a bit closer to the sea, a bit warmer, and the first ones to be cut down when the English started taking an interest in the commercial value of these guys. So maybe the world's tallest trees were here, and we just didn't know it. We didn't start measuring them accurately until perhaps it's too late. So I recommend jumping on this tour in about 200 years' time, and I may well be showing you the world's tallest tree. Who knows?
Awesome.
This guy's pretty healthy and still growing.
We have our picnic lunch in a nice park. Then we drove by some hop fields on our way to Bungarong Wildlife Sanctuary, which helps injured and orphaned wildlife.
Oh, poor little thing.
That's no baby wombat.
Oh, it's asleep. Is that a baby? Unhide your face.
So how about their weapon? That's just their...
So once they're blocking the entrance of the burrow with that cartilage plate, they have hardly any nerve endings back there, so they're not really going to feel any pain with anything trying to scratch or bite them to get them out. But they're quite impatient animals, so their other technique is to lay themselves down flat, tricking the predator, maybe such as a wild dog, and that way as soon as the predator's head or paw gets over that rump with the cartilage plate, they slam it to the roof. There's actually enough strength in there to crush the skull.
These are the famed Tasmanian devils.
So she'll stay around for a while like that. We have to be careful of what they feed and how much they feed, because they're a gorge feeder naturally, so they will eat as much as they possibly can, given the chance. Up to 40% of their body weight in one sitting.
These little guys seem pretty docile, but the caretaker wanted to show us how their personalities can change, living up to their name as devils when protecting their den. This little echidna has an exaggerated waddle because it's missing a foot. And of course they have the friendly kangaroos. Unfortunately it's wet and rainy, making the enclosure a bit muddy. Wet kangaroo. You wet root. You wet root. The type of kangaroos here in Tasmania are called forester kangaroos. The signs here say they may look big and tough, but they're really just softies on the inside. And if you really want to make friends with them, they really like to have their chest rubbed.
They're checking us out. See if we got any food. No, there's no food here, my dear. Thank you.
food. Oh yeah, where's my food?
They might be talking a different language.
As we leave Hobart, we pass by some of the stunning Dolomite cliffs. This formation is called the Pipe Organ. With the sun setting behind us, the captain announced it's the most impressive display he's seen in his 18 years traveling this coast.
On our way back to Sydney, Holland America presented us with our 100-day bronze medallions. And on our last night, we stayed up late to watch the super blood full moon eclipse.